topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Camping Show. This is CW Getz. My co-host Jesse Free is off this evening, and but we're gonna be flying here solo, so you know how that goes. Hopefully, I don't wreck this train on the way there. It's Wednesday, March 31st, 2021. We have a 39-degree Fahrenheit windy day here in Illinois, very near Chicago. It's been windy all week. We just love that wind. I think I'd love it more if I had a sailboat, but not so much right now. We've got a great show here for you this evening. Tonight's episode is The Outdoors Saved My Life with my special guest, Jillian Brown. Professional photographer, adventurer, and CEO of Camp My Way Foundation, 33-year-old Jillian Brown left her entire life behind in order to escape an abusive relationship. At one point, Jillian found herself living in a tent in the woods. Confused, depressed, and feeling a lack of self-control over her emotional stability, she learned that she was suffering from PTSD. Jillian refused medication and instead utilized the diagnosis as motivation to reconnect with herself by improving her mental and physical health through physical fitness, spending time in nature, and outdoor adventuring. A few years ago, Jillian became the first person in the world to paddle a tandem sea kayak down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. She also became the first Canadian to paddle across America. A 150-day journey, paddling over 6,500 kilometers through 16 states that included 23 portages, part of which was endured with a broken foot. Jillian has since been published internationally, having been featured in numerous magazines, podcasts, and social media platforms. Well, with that, welcome to the show, Jillian.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. What a great intro.
Well, hey, you are what it's about, man. So you're the one. Kudos to you. Hey, how's your weather there, by the way? And tell me exactly where you're actually located right now.
I'm tucked away in the backcountry of British Columbia.
Nice.
If anyone knows BC, the closest place would be Lillooet, about 70 kilometers away. High mountain roads to access it.
Wow. Nice.
And the weather's pretty nice.
It sounds like a great place to be, honestly. Now, okay, so what's your temperature up there, though? Is it still chilly?
It's still chilly. It definitely feels like spring today. There's lots of buds coming out. The tulips are starting to sprout too. Where we are, we're pretty notorious for having really strong winds. Like it sounds like you're having those prairie winds. We get those mountain valley winds. Not quite the Chinooks, but we get them funneling through straight at us. So it's starting to pick up right now.
Do you like that wind as much as I do? You know, you can tell I'm in love with it, right?
Well, it's different. I grew up on the prairies, so there's a difference between prairie wind in winter and the wind that we get out here, for sure.
Oh, is that right?
So,
right.
I don't envy you.
Yeah, well, you know, it is what it is. We deal with it because this is where we live, right? Not much of a choice there.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, we're all anxious to have you share your story. So let's start here. Let's start from 10 years ago when you were living in British Columbia, Canada. Very exactly where you're at now, maybe not in the same spot, but you were involved in a personal relationship and had recently started a business with your significant other. So what series of events occurred from there at that point?
Okay, so in 2010 is when I moved from Manitoba So just north of where you guys are in Illinois, the prairies, getting those cold winds, and came out to the mountains, kind of find myself and connect to nature a little bit better, do some photography. And I had gotten a job at a dog sledding company as a photographer and fell in love with both the sport and one of the mushers.
Cool.
To which we started a relationship that lasted for 5.5 years. And while in that relationship, we bred our own dog teams, as well as started our own business in Golden, British Columbia, which is close to Alberta border.
Okay, sure.
Unfortunately, the relationship was abusive basically from the get-go. And after 5.5 years, to get to safety, I had to make the decision to leave my entire world and life behind. All of my dogs, my businesses, my home, and the person I thought I loved. Picking up a tent for $60 from the $300 that I had been hiding for some time, and setting it up in the woods and living what people called homeless in a tent for 7 months.
Let me ask you a question. When you say you left everything behind, now, I mean, we're talking everything. We're talking clothes. I mean, you had some clothes, obviously, but you left a lot of your possessions. Like, that's it. I'm done. I got to get out of here. Is that right?
Yeah, I took what I could fit in my Jeep, my one dog. Basically, the only things I took were what I could fit, like I said, and what were just mine, so that there was not that feeling of this person could come after me in some way for something I took. Sure. If they come after me, it's for me in some way. At that point, I hadn't been sleeping. I was living in total fear and heightened sense of adrenaline for so long that I wasn't really comprehending what was real necessarily and what was not, and not connecting the dots. So when I left, I didn't know if this person would come after me. A lot of threats were made once I left too. So it was as best I could, detaching myself in every way from that person, from the people that we were friends with too, just to get away, essentially.
So, I mean, when you made this decision, I mean, this was something did you plan it all out, or do you just like one day say, hey, you know what, I got to get out of here?
I think a lot of it is kind of a subconscious planning.
Yeah.
When we had moved away to Golden to start this business, about a year, 9 months to a year prior, before moving away, I had given one of my friends a hug and said, I'll see you again next year. And I always connect that I think I knew subconsciously that I would be able to get away at that point. Part of it being that I knew that there was now an attachment. We had this business that I knew that he couldn't just leave the dogs. He couldn't just leave this home that we had established. Yeah. So I think there was that sort of subconscious feeling of, okay, he's kind of stuck there. He can't just come and abandon that for me. And why would he? He has everything that he needs and wanted there. He has a beautiful life there. All that's not there is me. So when I did leave, a week prior, I had business in a different part of BC. And it was an encounter that I had on that trip with a stranger who treated me like family, who actually saw me. For 5.5 years, I had felt like it was just about him. I was very much kind of hidden, I felt, at least. And when I would walk in places, I was his girlfriend. It wasn't Jill. It was, oh, you're this person's girlfriend. And I finally was
You didn't have you didn't have an entity. It was you were like a possession almost.
That's how I felt, for sure. That's how I felt. So when this stranger acknowledged me and had no judgment towards me and really treated me like family while I was there, with no expectations of anything from me. Yeah. It was his phone number as I was about to pull into that home, that relationship, that I looked at my phone and I dialed, and basically without saying anything, he figured out what was going on, and he did everything in his power to figure out contacts that were in that community for me if I needed. He answered the phone every time I called, and he's a very busy, very well-established businessman, and he would step out of meetings just to make sure I was okay and to help me plan this leaving.
Definitely makes you a priority. Yeah, good for him and good for you for that too. So we were left off. You were living in the woods in a tent. I mean, how does that happen? I mean, where do you know to go? And give me a little bit about the circumstances. I mean, you're in a tent. What have you got to, cook with, eat with, sleep with? I mean, and there's one thing, you plan a camping trip. Yeah, you're going to sleep in the tent. That's fine. But when you're in a situation like you are, that's not really laid out and planned. And when you've got nice, easy, fluffy sort of situation and, all the gear you need. So what was it like? What did you have?
Yeah, so it was a little different than any expedition I've ever done before or after. That's for sure, because you have all of your everything that you own in this tent. And you do have to go and get a job and work so that you're not living in this tent for the rest of your life.
Right.
So you have to trust that you can leave those things there. So I was fortunate that when I left, I went back to a town that I had lived in prior, where I had actually met the gentleman, the first place that I had lived in Squamish, British Columbia, which is just north of Vancouver.
Okay.
And I knew of people that had land there. So I knew that there was at least a property where I could pitch a tent, and I knew that there was owners of the property. So potentially there wouldn't be intruders.
Right.
And
be there.
Yeah, so there was at least that knowledge. And then when I started to fear the person would come looking for me, then I could at least let them know and show them what the vehicle looked like if they saw it passing the house or anything, sort of thing. But I also knew that the place was beautiful. So it's Squamish, that town. I had met people there prior to meeting him. There had always been a connection for me there for feeling safe and feeling like I could be myself. So I was really drawn to go back there. It's not like I couldn't have gone back to Winnipeg and moved back in with my parents. They've always been there for me my whole entire life. I've always had their support, my grandparents, my brother. But mentally, that just would have been a different battle going back to the prairies rather than staying in the mountains and finding myself again. Oh, you're muted. You have your mute button on. on the program.
Okay.
There you go.
No wonder. I'm like, okay, my computer is doing this on its own. I apologize. I just love technical stuff, man, so much.
Yeah. I understand. Doesn't get along with me either. So.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And I apologize for that. So I don't know.
Okay.
I'm hearing things in my head. I'm hearing you on my computer speakers, and I apologize. So I don't know if are we still, you can hear both ways?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, let me say there, we're talking about, you hadn't slept in so long. How did that feel like finally getting a night's rest, an actually good night's rest? That had to be like, right?
That definitely took some time. I thought it would be something that would come really quick, being away from that situation, as well as I thought I would just find ease and peace of mind. And it was because I didn't find that. And after a month of being in the tent, I still wasn't sleeping. I was more confused than ever. And I thought about committing suicide at the river where I walked my dog. And that was when I went to a counselor and was diagnosed with PTSD. Unfortunately, what happens with many people is all I was told was, sounds like you have PTSD. You should come back next week. I wasn't given any sort of tools. I wasn't given even an explanation or a definition of what PTSD stood for or is. So I was sent back to this tent, terrified, thinking, I only know of PTSD as a diagnosis for people that have been in the military and gone to war.
Sure. Yeah.
And I just was in a relationship that wasn't so great, and now I'm in a tent. How does that compare? And it was after that when I got back to my tent, I grabbed my dog and I let her off her leash, and I just started following her and hiking for hours and hours. And I got back to the tent that night, and I actually slept for the first time in many years.
Wow.
And the next day I got up and did the same thing for the whole day. I just let her off her leash and I just followed her everywhere. And I realized what was different was I was getting a lot more fresh air that I needed.
Yeah.
I was moving that trapped energy that was within me, which is now what I know is PTSD. It's just all that energy that was built up in my nervous system that hadn't been moved for so long. And getting out and hiking and living in that present moment of following my dog and being curious of what are we following? Where are we going? What are we going to see next? I wasn't thinking about what I had been through, and I wasn't fixated on what was coming next. It was purely in that moment. And I just did that for a very long time and started to integrate a workout within those walks and hikes too, to move more and more energy. And it's something that I've continued since then, being in the tent 5.5, 6 years ago now. I've done that every single morning, every day since.
Wow. That's amazing. You know how, and let's just go back here for a second. How, when you're living in a tent, I mean, how are you eating? I mean, and you know, that has a lot to do, pardon me, that has a lot to do with one's mental health too. And I mean, how was that going? I mean, that's kind of stressful too, because it's not like walking into your kitchen and bam, we're going to throw something together and throw it in the microwave and, you know, super simple. That's like a chore. I mean, a big chore, and every day, right? Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah, I learned to live very simplistically. I've never been wealthy or anything, so I've always lived pretty simple. And it really taught me to, for one, not be picky, but also just live so budgeted and cautiously, because I would have to go get groceries basically every day or every time I was within town.
Yeah.
Because I'm in British Columbia. Hey, we got every type of wildlife you could imagine. So there's if I leave food in my tent, there's going to be mice chewing through it. There's going to be bears destroying it. Who knows what's going to get into it? All the bugs and everything. My dog. So a lot of it was, just picking up groceries that were not going to go bad, like oats, cheap oats for breakfast, protein bars. And then I'd just buy like the on sale bagels or bread or whatever and munch on one of those.
So you're not really eating the best that you're like, is like, hey, this is great food every night and I'm really nourishing my body. I mean, you were living in a rough situation all the way around.
At that time, I also, that stranger that I had mentioned, he took me in, he introduced me to his friends. Everybody that I met from that point on became like family, and they would invite me over for meals. They didn't necessarily know my situation. It's not like I walk up to somebody and be like, hey, I'm technically homeless in a tent. Because I was walking around quite confidently. And at that point, I had kind of figured out my tools. Yep. So I felt okay with myself. And I wasn't being kind of, no, I don't want to say beaten down like in the physical sense, but in the mental sense every day. So I was really starting to kind of connect to myself and give off that. I was just so happy and thankful at that point to be out of that situation wherever I was with whoever I was.
Yeah. Relieved.
But I think I kind of exuded that. So people would take me in. I ended up, when it started the rainy season, a much older gentleman who was like a great uncle, a 65-year-old who I had met many years ago. He had a little tiny apartment under a pub, and he just basically gave it to me to stay in. Okay. So that I had somewhere a little bit safer, because he hated the idea that I was in a tent as a young woman.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people in the town, in the community, pubs would give me like yam fries and stuff. And they would find me, they would let me paint the place at night, it was amazing. I felt like the community really came together, even though they didn't even know me or my situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask you about a little more specific about a situation where the moment that you were in, and we were going to talk about that. Right now, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here with more of the Camping Show on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV.
It is time to go camping. Introducing Campground Views virtual tours. You can tour the campground, see the sites, see if they are available, and click to book your perfect spot. Hit the open road and explore the amazing places found in nature. We make it easy to discover, find, and book your site so that you can go have the fun and freedom you seek. Campground Views virtual tours make it easy and simple for you to see where you are going.
And we're back with our guest, Jillian Brown, on the Camping Show. Jillian, when you were thinking of taking your own life, let's paint the picture. Where were you at? What were you thinking? What was going through your head? And I mean, that had to be very, very intense.
It's really hard to explain. In words. So what I could say is basically every emotion and feeling you could ever have was all kind of coming in and out of me in every way. Like my body had basically started to shut down too. I felt sick all the time. Again, I wasn't sleeping. And I was just so confused by all of it, being that, like I said, I was away and I should feel a weight lifted. Mm-hmm. And I took my dog for a walk that morning, like I always do. And we walked by the river and I thought about putting her leash around me and jumping in. And it was looking down at my dog when I thought that and seeing her just sitting there looking out and enjoying the view. And then she turns to me and looks up at me with that like big puppy dog smile. Mm-hmm. Like, come on, Mom, let's keep going. And it just, I had tears rolling down my face. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't, like, what is going on here? I've never in my entire life ever thought about that. Even when I was in that relationship, in that dark place. Yeah. Every day I would find myself going down to feed my 16 sled dogs. And as I would walk around in the morning, I'd give them all their pets and snuggles and rub my face in their fluffy necks. And I would say I was thankful it was me there and not someone else, because somehow I knew I had the strength to get through this. Yeah. And then I'm now away from that. And I'm having these thoughts of ending it all. And I couldn't ever say where that came from. And I don't know if anybody ever could say where that came from, because I feel like I was always happy. But it was every emotion and feeling you could possibly have all at once.
Is that something that was building? Did you feel it, or it happened? And it was like, where did that come from?
Yeah, that thought, I think, just all of a sudden happened, which is what just was terrifying. Yeah. Was that I never would have had that feeling. I've never had that feeling before in my entire life, no matter where I've been, and to this point now. So that's why I immediately just took my dog, and I like something here. There's something I don't understand going on here. Yeah. And went to find out if somebody could give me some answers. And unfortunately, which happens to a lot of us, and especially our first responders and our veterans and our military members, they're not really given an explanation or tools to a diagnosis of PTSD. It's usually just, here's meds. Okay. This will help you mask it better. And to me, I already in general just don't like taking meds. Right. But to me, I just didn't see how that was teaching me how to overcome this and how to get through it other than it just masking it further, and potentially making me have some sort of addiction or feeling of need to get through life with just reliancy on a pill.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's addressing the symptoms rather than dealing with the cause. Doesn't that sound about right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I tell you. So from there, I mean, you got yourself through that. And where did you go from there? Now you started doing some things that were like a little bit life-changing. Well, not a little bit, a lot life-changing. So where did you go from there?
Yeah, so once I kind of connected the dots with the tools and what was working for doing the hiking and the fitness and being outdoors, being in that tent was truly the best place to heal and find myself, because it was just me. And to get through and learn what you need to learn, you're the only one that's going to get yourself through it.
Right.
You have to be the one to put in the work for you. And it's not selfish. It's the only way. You can't rely on a counselor. You can't rely on your parents, your family, the pills. You can't it's you that's going to save your own life.
Mm-hmm.
And through learning that, I discovered that I had that. If we can put that towards achieving goals, then really you can achieve anything. Having that belief that you can overcome whatever obstacle, and that knowing you do have the strength, whether that means that you have to train harder or get a different education or whatever it means, depending on your goal. And failure, if failure happens that attempt and it's still your goal, you can still achieve it. You just got to get more tools, learn more, and try again. And you'll eventually accomplish it with that belief and putting in that work, which allowed me to then start doing these crazy expeditions. Oh, I think. And the big part with those 2 expeditions that were mentioned, if others can still hear me, I'll just keep talking.
Yes, I apologize, and I got to tell you something.
That's okay.
There is a ghost in this machine because I'm doing nothing, and things are just bing, bing, bing. I'm like, what in the hell is going on over here? I apologize.
That's okay. You know what? It's probably me, because I am cursed with technology.
Oh, well, yeah, I think I'm a little bit on that program too. And yeah, that's so I apologize.
No, no worries.
Well, let's talk about, okay. And I don't know where you left off, and I apologize. I will hear this later though in the recording, but we're on this. Let's talk about the Colorado River trip. First of all, what inspired that adventure? And was it everything leading up to that? I'm assuming, right?
So that expedition, after finding this belief in myself and starting to push my limits and documenting it with my passion of photography and writing, and starting to showcase that to the world through social media channels, through beginning to write articles, I connected with a new friend, Jamie Sharp, who's an incredible paddler. And we did a trip with a few others, documenting orca whales on the Johnson Strait between mainland and Vancouver Island. And it was after that he presented this crazy idea of taking a tandem sea kayak down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. I'm like, that sounds amazing. I'm going to say yes to anything. So I in Jamie. He's like, okay, I'll let you know if it happens. Well, a week before this trip, he calls me up and he's like, listen, I had a different partner in mind, but they bailed, and you had expressed interest, and you basically don't say no to anything. And I believe in you. So you want to come do this trip with me? And
that's awesome.
Of course I said yes.
Sure. Absolutely.
So a week from it, we put in on my birthday on February 11th, we put in.
Oh, wow.
And both of us kind of had like this feeling that we might not be successful, but we had this trust that in each other's abilities and belief in each other that we made it happen. And it was the craziest thing I've ever done.
That's pretty dang cool. So, I mean, how was that trip in terms of challenge versus accomplishment? Because that had to be huge, right? I mean, you're like, hey, this is really something, man. Let me look where I've come from here to now. Look what I'm doing now,
Yeah. Oh gosh, it was one of the best trips for sure. The group that we had, we were self-supported, but we had a team of other paddlers in their own individual kayaks with us, all people that I had never met before. And it was just this amazing energy because everyone was just so happy to be out there and just absorbing the moments. And everybody kind of had their own reason for being there. One, his dad had just passed and he wanted to spread his dad's ashes in one of the canyons because his dad loved the Grand Canyon. And others, it was their first time being on whitewater. So everybody just had this drive and this determination and this support for each other that after every rapid, everyone's high-fiving like it was the first rapid any of us had ever done. It was just this amazing experience.
What a great
and it was truly
environment.
that team. Oh, it was that group of the 7 of us that it was just the best part about the whole thing. The rapids were amazing. And overwhelming. Like the Grand Canyon is rated on its own whitewater class because the water is so huge and grand. There's nothing that compares to it. So it's it's these huge waves, and being in a 22-foot long sea kayak, it's so long that it doesn't ride and coast above and float over a wave like a little playboat does. The bow stabs into a wave.
Knifes through
it. So the person in the bow, me, is stabbed into the wave too and goes under and through the wave. And the person in the back kind of gets to ride over it. So we come out of these waves and the team is like, Jill, you are nuts. None of us would ever do that. I don't know why you're doing this right now. That looks horrible. And Jamie, my partner, is like, what are you talking about? It was just as bad for me. And they're like, you have no idea.
Oh, wow.
It was great. It was so amazing. But
it probably never bothered you, did it? It probably never really bothered you, did it, at that point?
It was extremely painful.
Oh, seriously?
Wow. You're hit with so much water and you're trying to charge. Like in whitewater, they say, just charge it. And you're like leaning forward, trying to stay forward. And you're slammed back. So your like ribs hurt, your back hurts. At one point I got out of the rapid and I'm patting myself thinking that my helmet was gone, that my PFD was even gone. I was hit with so much force. Yeah, it was powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess now what I was referring to is when I say it didn't really bother you, just because what you had been through prior, you're going, I can do this. This is okay. I got this, right? A little bit of that?
Yeah, there were times where I was just like, Jamie, you go scout the rapid. I don't even want to see it. So.
Oh, man. Yeah, that sounds intense. It sounds very much intense. Well,
it was amazing. And anybody that has the interest in going down the Grand Canyon, I would highly recommend it. Do one of the rafting trips. Take the 21 days or the 28 days and go and experience all the little canyons along it because it's magnificent. It is grand, truly.
Well, now speaking of challenges, tell us about the Paddle Across America adventure you did and how you were even able to portage part of that way with a broken foot. I mean, first of all, how'd you break your foot? And then how did you actually manage to do that you had to be in excruciating pain, right? I would be pain.
Yeah. So this is another expedition where I was brought on by another member who his team fell out. They had a falling out and they needed somebody right away. They already had the funds, the sponsors, and they needed somebody that both the sponsors, the magazines, everybody already kind of knew about and trusted that they would support. And they called me and it was just such a huge honor to be included in that group of considered people. and they needed primarily somebody who could document well paddling and doing this
wow.
feat.
Sure.
So after paddling up the Columbia River and then up the Snake River, we reach Lewiston, Idaho. And that's where we begin the portage over the Great Divide, the Continental Divide, or the Rocky Mountains,
right,
through Idaho and Montana. And on the second day, my foot broke a stress fracture, which the number one in the military from carrying too much weight, basically.
Okay.
And you just can't, your body can't take it. You break one of the metatarsals or a growth plate in your foot.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. I had this 18-foot canoe on wheels with all the gear and a big backpack on with cameras strapped around my neck, and the canoe tethered to my backpack, and I was pulling it up a mountain, and my foot couldn't handle it. And it snapped. And I was so mad when it happened because I trained really hard. I put in a lot of work mentally and physically for these things.
Yeah.
And I was just so mad that my body would give out like that I was like, I'm not stopping.
That gave you more determination than ever, right?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but like stupid determination because I knew better. It's not like I haven't been injured before and done this, and knowing that you push yourself when you have an injury, it's probably going to get worse.
Right.
But I just didn't want to. I just didn't want to stop, and I kept going until day 16. And at that point, both feet had swelled so much that I had blisters on every inch of my foot, basically, and all my toenails had turned black. A whole bunch of them ended up falling off, and I couldn't get my boots on anymore. Everything was infected and just bleeding, and it was just a disaster.
Wow.
And so I slipped my Crocs on that morning and walked all the gear over to the highway, the interstate, which is where we were at that point.
Yep.
And I realized there's no way I can hike in Crocs pulling this stuff. So I hitchhiked to our next camps with all the gear. So I still stayed on the same pace so that I still had the same experience and got to connect with the locals and everything. But yeah, and it wasn't at that point, I mean, obviously my boots wouldn't fit.
Yeah.
But it was more so that I had open wounds on my feet, which were about to go into the Missouri River, which is the second most polluted river in North America. And that's not the smartest of ideas to have open wounds going into that water.
No.
So
I know stories about things like that have got, some serious infection and some problems. Oh my God.
Yeah. I knew the break could have, by the time I got in the canoe, I was going to be in a canoe for the next 150 days.
Yeah.
From there. And so I knew the break would have time to get to heal slowly in the canoe, and I could soak it in the water if need be. But the open wounds are a totally different story.
Yeah, that's a whole different program right there. Oh my God.
Yeah, which is something I learned later on the expedition too.
Yeah.
When I finished, for a couple of weeks, I had gotten poison oak on one spot of my body, and it ended up spreading all over my legs. And between that and fly blights and ant bites and all sorts of things, everything, I was soaked. I was in tropical storms for the final couple of weeks. That everything was infected, and I put a video up on social media of what my legs looked like. And a doctor contacted me and is like, you need to go to a hospital right now, or you're going to end up with flesh eating disease, and you're close to gangrene. And if you can't get to a hospital, I'll send you all the prescriptions that you need to the nearest pharmacy, and they'll be paid for waiting for you, which is what ended up happening. She paid for everything. She had them waiting for me, which was just incredible. Just another active. That was the best part that the most powerful experience on the trip was the people along the way.
Yeah. And
for sure.
That's I've heard that before, and that is about, it really is about people, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah.
That's, Well, Jane, I tell you what, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to find out where you're at now. Okay. Sound good?
Sounds great. Great.
Take the quick break. Don't go away. We'll be right back with more of the Camping Show on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV.
It is time to go camping. Introducing Campground View's virtual tours. You can tour the campground, see the sites, see if they are available, and click to book your perfect spot. Hit the open road and explore the amazing places found in nature. We make it easy to discover, find, and book your site so that you can go have the fun and freedom you seek. Campground View's virtual tours make it easy and simple for you to see where you are going.
And we're back with our guest, Jillian Brown, on the Camping Show. Jillian, you survived all of that. You've survived quite a bit. You have had some experiences that I hope I never have on trips. Like, yeah, I must be kind of a baby because I get mad when, when I stub my toe or something like that.
And there's other ones too. The little pinky got sewn back on last year. It got cut off while we were flipping our 400-pound tire, shackled in 60 pounds of chains to raise awareness about PTSD and for Camp My Way. Since the pandemic hit and we couldn't do our fundraisers for Camp My Way, which we're about to talk about, we decided to do this awareness expedition instead. And when I was gathering firewood at the top of a mountain, a camp saw closed on my hand and cut my finger off.
Oh, man.
And so we had to hike out. We had to hike out and drive 2.5, 3 hours to the closest hospital where they just put a couple stitches in and sent me another 5 hours away to get surgery and have it all reattached and everything. And the next day we were back up on the mountain camping. It was great. So this is all that it does now. It's just kind of a little heavy thing.
But you still have it, and that's good. That's good.
I actually asked the doctors to take it off because I figured that it would just be useless and get in the way of doing these expeditions and paddling. So like, if it's going to be a problem, just get rid of it. They're like, no, we'll try to make it look normal.
You are a very tough person, I can tell you. Well, you know what? Let's talk about that. Tell us real quick. We got about 5 minutes left of the show here, but and it's been fascinating. I mean, you have some great stories. But tell us a little bit about the Camp My Way Foundation.
So where I'm at now, through all of my experiences, I've now connected with Camp My Way and I'm lead guide and CEO, accompanying the founder, Terrence Kosikar. And we are a camp, we don't like to call it program because it's a way of life. We bring first responders, veterans, and youth up to a safe, natural environment. And we share our tools that we both have learned through our lived experiences of moving our trapped energy of PTSD. And we go out camping and do everything that I do on an expedition. Find comfort within the uncomfortable. And remove those that come up here from an environment that's not a place to learn tools and heal. And teach them ways to overcome and move that energy no matter where you are with no excuses and find that belief in yourself.
Absolutely. That is amazing. I mean, that is a very good, a great thing. I mean, that is an excellent thing. Let me ask you this. Is therapy still a part of your life? I mean, do you ever stop that, or is it something that you really have to maintain?
Every day you have to use your tools every day, the good days and the bad days, whether it's going to a counselor. That wasn't something that I connected with as a tool, but others it works to go and talk through these things. They find that connection with a person. But to us, we call psychiatry as in psychiatry, and we go hug trees.
There you go.
We go and walk through nature every day. And we go and flip our tire. We practice fitness. We breathe every single morning in our bed before we get up, in a safe place where we trust ourselves to close our eyes.
Yeah.
We connect back to our body and stretch and move and make sure everything's working right. And then we breathe and start our day off at that pace, a nice calm pace. I call it the pace of nature.
Yeah.
And
that is your...
those tools that we connect with, no matter what they are, art, therapy, hikes, yoga, whatever each person's tool is, you have to do it every single day.
Yeah.
It has to be ritual.
Yeah.
Good days or bad days, especially on the good days, because then you'll remember to do them on the bad.
That makes perfect sense. Well, we got about 2 minutes left, but I want to ask you this real quick. What advice would you offer someone? And maybe that's it, what you just said. But what advice would you offer someone who, as we speak, may be experiencing the same type of situation or symptoms that you'd been dealing with back then, for quite a while? What advice would you give them?
I would say the best thing you can do right now with no excuse is remove yourself from that environment by just simply going for a walk. Go for a walk. My favorite thing is to go for a walk and sit down and have a conversation with a squirrel, because no matter what, it's going to make you laugh and you'll feel connected to where you are, and you won't think about what was going on back in that other environment, where you're coming from, what prompted the walk, and where you're going back to. You'll just be thinking about how silly you must look talking to a squirrel.
And that's a head clearing thing, right?
Yeah.
That's great. That's awesome.
It's the easiest thing and no excuse. Everyone can simply stop what they're doing right now, tell their boss, I need 5 minutes. I got to go for a little walk. Just go for a walk.
I'll be back. Yeah. I'll be back. Right. Well, Jillian, that is awesome. That is some great advice too. Where can listeners go to connect with you on social media and then also learn more about Camp My Way?
So campmyway.com is the simplest place to connect with us and find out more about the camp and the programs. And then for myself, Instagram is a great place to see my photography and my writing. It's Jillian A. Brown Photography. And through there, you can find Camp My Way, Instagram and social media links as well. And feel free always to send me a private message if you like, whether it's in regards to the camp, in regards to photography, or what we've talked about today. Anything. I'm always down to have a conversation with someone new or old. Old friends are great too.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Well, you know what? And amazing stories and an amazing life you've had. I mean, that's an understatement. Amazing. You have gone through a lot. But we are out of time. And Jillian, I want to thank you for being my guest here on the Camping Show. It was a big pleasure having you here. And thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor.
Well, you're a wonderful person. And so it was a pleasure for me to interview you. Well, we hope you'll tune in next week for The Finer Points of Portaging with special guest Cliff Jacobson. Once again, thank you for tuning into the Camping Show. This is CW Getz reminding you, learn more, do more. See you next week.